Welcome to the meeting of a Town of Barnstable Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. Today is March 25th, 2024, and this meeting is being recorded by the Town of Barnstable and will be rebroadcast on Channel 8 after the meeting has been concluded. If there's anybody here who is recording this meeting, please let yourself be known to us. The agenda of this meeting is available on the town website. Chuck, if you will call the roll to determine whether we have a quorum, please.
Oh, Lillian.
Here.
Hector.
Here.
Jim.
Here.
Neil.
Here.
Chris.
Here.
Jackie is absent. And Chuck is here, so we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Is there any member of the public who's here? No, I don't see anybody. So the the first item of business is to approve all of these minutes. So we'll just go right down and in order. So I will entertain a motion to approve the January 30th minutes.
I move.
Moved. Is there a second?
I approve.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 30th meeting. Is there any discussion or change? I think that was a CIP subcommittee meeting, right?
Yes.
Are there any changes?
I have none.
Not hearing any. We'll vote on that then.
All right, Lillian.
Yes.
Hector.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Neil.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Chuck is yes. They're approved.
Okay.
Lillian, can I interject that if we could expedite this and approve the balance of the minutes all at once, that would be helpful if we're allowed to do that?
Well, I didn't know, because I know that you find all of the little quirks of the minutes. But if you have looked through all of them and are willing to make a motion for approval of February 12, February 26, 27, and March 15, that'll be great.
I move. I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of February 12th, 26th, 27th, and March 15th. Are there any changes or corrections to any of those? Not hearing any, we'll just take a vote then.
Lillian.
Yes.
Hector.
Yes.
Jim.
Yes.
Neil.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Chuck is yes, so they pass.
All right. Thank you very much.
That's great. And I want to salute Mark Milne with all of his many duties. One of the things he has to do is corral these minutes for each of our meetings. And Mark,
Yes.
Thank you very much for taking care of that.
Yeah.
You're welcome. And thanks to Teresa as well. And we'll get those posted to the website.
So now we're all caught up.
Right.
Okay.
So thanks to Teresa too.
Oh yeah, Teresa really captures the meeting well. The next item is the discussion of the CIP subcommittee report to the town council on April 4th, and I will turn it over to Neil, who has the 9th version of his presentation, at least.
Okay.
Okay.
How would you like to do this, Mark? Is it
I think you share
I have
screen.
it. Can I share my screen? You're muted, Mark.
I can share mine if you'd like. I think you have capabilities as well, but if you don't mind, I'll go forward and share mine.
Okay.
Thank you. That's fine.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. This is actually slide number 18
of the presentation that starts with the finance section of the presentation that Mark will be giving. And so the last 8 or actually 9 slides are follow his, which describes the policies, the rules, and the details of the FY 2025 CIP that's being recommended. So
Neil,
that's,
is this the same slides deck that you forwarded over the weekend?
yes, this is 98% the same.
Okay.
Few word changes, that's about it. So the approach here, which was suggested by Mark, is to use very large type, bullets, and keep it readable as much as possible. So in this case, what we've done is we've made all the headlines really be the messages that we want to get across, which are very readable. And in actuality, if you just read the headlines on these charts, you get all the messages. The detail is in the body of the chart. But what we want to start out with is the example of success, which is really fiscal year 2025 CIP, which is, as we know, the largest in the town's history. But by planning for it ahead of time, knowing that via the CIP forecast, it was going to be a huge number, the town instituted a lot of new taxes that's actually making fiscal year 2025 possible to finance. And the examples of the kinds of taxes are the new tax on local meals, the room tax on short-term rentals, et cetera, as listed there. So the message really here is, even when you have really big numbers, if you plan ahead, you can manage them. Any comments?
So you start off with the 3 times higher. Where does that pop as a reader? Where does that come out to me on this slide?
It doesn't show it. It's the 269 compared to 83 was the largest in history.
And where do I see that? I must be missing it. Where is the 83?
It's not there. We can add that.
Oh, I'm just asking. I'm just going with your headline, which is 3 times higher, and I'm looking for the 3 times higher number, and I didn't see it. Didn't pop out at me.
Right, and you could either put it on there, Neil, or we can speak to it.
Yeah, speak to it. You can also speak. I'm just asking.
Yeah. So
I can add it as a footnote, because I think Jim's point is a good one, which the headline doesn't have the supporting data underneath it, and I can provide that without making it too,
Yeah, don't make it too busy. Don't make it too busy. It's busy.
And when we speak about CIP, if we can use the acronym, or we could say planned capital improvement spending in fiscal 2025, something like that. So it's you speak in plain English, but I think the slide is good. I think it's a good place to start, and I think it's good to start with what you just said, Neil, which is, if we plan ahead, good things happen. If we don't plan ahead, it's not going to be pretty.
Good point. Should we move to the second slide? So, given how one can meet challenges, the challenges have not gone away. For fiscal year 2026 through 28, the CIP requests are now significantly higher than they were last year, and they total to about $515 million, which is going to require some management trade-offs to be made. Last year, looking at the chart, the submission was $279 million. This year, on the right-hand side, it's now $515 million. And most of that increase came from 3 areas. CWMP, which went up $91 million. Part of that, 2/3 of it actually, is an additional treatment plant operation for reverse osmosis. DPW added several new projects, about 2/3 for buildings and about 1/3 for roads and bridges, which added $84 million to last year's CIP. And the school, based upon its facilities assessment, added $41 million this year and went from about 5 projects last year to actually 92 this year. So we have a big number, just like we had last year, but this one's actually spread over 3 years, and it's going to require the town to make some judgments relative to what to keep, what not to do now, but to delay, and where can we find additional revenue to pay for the financing for the loans that much of this will require.
Neil, I think this slide is fabulous, and I think it's well thought out, well laid out. And the step increase allows you to, at least me as a reader, allow me to now put into my thoughts where you're coming from on the first slide, which is a three-time increase, and why that's where it is and why it's significant. So an excellent slide. And I might recommend that rather than on the previous slide 18, you might want to just put a speaker note for yourself to amplify that it'll be demonstrated in the next slide or something of that, rather than clutter up a slide with more information on 18. Just put a speaker note for yourself just to introduce that coming into slide 19. This is very well done.
I like you, Jim. Any other comments?
No, it's a wonderful slide.
Good.
I think you owe Jim $20, Neil.
That's a bargain. I think the feedback we got today when we met with Mark Ells and Dan Santos was we want to be careful in our presentation not to scare people, not to be negative. So I think we want to position this that I took away as there's a challenge. We've met the challenge before. We have to do it again. And as Hector said, I think the theme that I'm thinking of trying to continue is we have a challenge. We've met this before. The key is thinking and planning and executing ahead. I think, Mark, you could correct me, but you for fiscal year 25, the activities in terms of new taxes started 4 years ago, right?
They actually started, some of them were about 10 years ago. Local meals tax, increase in local rooms tax, and traditional lodging. So it's been over a decade we've been accumulating resources.
But I would also say, Neil, that there's a difference between too much information on a page and overwhelming the audience. I think that crisp, clear data like this, no matter how complex, doesn't overwhelm the audience. And if it does, they ask questions. So I think, again, I just think this is a well laid out slide.
Good. Well, I have 6 more slides to screw it up.
Neil,
Yes.
Mark, can you go back to that slide? Just help me out. The bottom left and the bottom right, the bottom left, fiscal 20, the label, there's that delta sign or whatever that Greek letter is before the parenthetical. What does that mean?
It's the mathematical sigma for summing.
Summing. Okay.
Yeah, it's sigma.
Right. Okay.
I think that requires a voiceover because obviously it's if you point that out, then I'm sure we'll find that to be the case with other people. I'm not sure. My problem became how to not make that a really long label. Maybe I should just bite the bullet.
So the way to read this is the 279 represents last year's approved plan capital spending for the 3 fiscal years, 26, 28, 7, 28. Is that right?
That is correct. It was not the approved, it was the submission.
Submission.
the submission. Okay, requests. Okay,
Right. As is this year, those are requests.
So we're measuring like data.
right. Okay. CIP requests. So we haven't yet gotten into Markel's approve or proposed approvals that the town council will consider.
They're
Right.
past that, correct. This is, and this, I think, is the good news that this is, with the CIP's 5-year plan, it gives the town insight into what's coming down the road. And that's the thing that we need to prepare for.
Okay,
If we do this in 2026, in the next year, there's no time to prepare.
right. Okay.
Okay. The next slide is the one slide we've taken from the report because I think it's important to make the point that I think at today's meeting with Mark and Dan, at least to me, became reinforced. And that's we need to get people to begin to understand that this capital plan doesn't stand on its own. That we borrow the money and then we pay for the money, just like with a mortgage, in the operating budget. And that as we take more money in terms of loans, the debt service will go up every year. And as Mark has provided to us, it will go up by 13 million just for CWMP alone, not including DPW, schools, or anybody else. And we're going to have to cover those annual costs after 2025 with new revenues or cost cuts. The good news is 2026 for CWMP is covered by the things that have done before, but 2027 and beyond are, in terms of new loans, are not shown in this chart. And they're going to be probably just as big as we're taking out now up to this date. So this is something where I think, based upon what I took away from the meeting today, ought to be something that the operating budget report tries to reinforce in May, that well, there hasn't been a debt service section, for instance, in the operating budget because it's been so small. I'm wondering if there's not an opportunity to start to talk about that and how it's going to be very manageable in 2025, but is something to be thinking about beyond that. I mean, Lillian, what's your thought?
Well, yeah, that's true. As we said in the meeting today, the two budgets are intertwined, and the CIP doesn't stand alone, and the operating budget doesn't stand alone because what happens in one affects the other. So, in the fixed costs, it's gonna have a terrific impact. So I think what I'll do when I do the introduction of CFAC, at the next town council meeting, is to talk about the interrelationship between the two budgets. Primarily because there are so many new members who might not realize that they're one and the same.
Any other comments or suggestions?
My question here is analogous to the one in the last slide. So just to make sure we're talking apples and oranges, the last slide was CIP requests. Now here we're talking CIP requests in total. And this slide focuses on CWMP. Planned expenditures, approved expenditures. What, how would you characterize this? Because this is the last one again was all of CIP, and now we're just focused on CWMP, and these are Markel's recommendations and what it would do to the town debt.
No, this is, and you make a good point, and I'm kind of working with the data we have. We don't have a debt service forecast for the proposed or submitted CIP. What we have from Mark Milne is the debt service that will be required for the loans through fiscal year 2026. That's all I have. However, I think that hopefully can be used to make the point that by 2030, there's going to be an extra $13 million just for CWMP added to that debt service. That will actually make it bigger than police or some of the other departments that we think of as core.
Neil, if you want to see what the debt service actions are, the general fund and the CWMP, review part 4 of the CIP document. We do have a 5-year or a projection in there that includes what the projected debt service is for both the general fund projects that are being proposed as well as the CWMP projects.
Ah,
Yeah, I'm looking at that now.
part 4. I apologize for missing that.
Yeah, it begins on page 25.
Right.
But that's okay. It is in there.
Well,
you
we've got a week and a half almost to do this, so let me go
Yeah.
see if I can make this an apples and apples, because I think Hector's point's good. And I guess
There's also a number of projects that have been previously authorized by the town council that we have not borrowed for yet. So we
Right.
also have a projected annual debt service estimate for all of those projects as well built into those projections. So we have to account for that. We have to make sure that we're building into our operating budgets for the future what we anticipate those debt service obligations to be on everything that's been approved to date and everything that's going to be proposed.
I will get on top of that and run it by you and everyone else, so we get it right. But
Okay,
that's going to be even a bigger number, you're saying. I
yeah,
mean, by definition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, our current debt service obligations are across all funds, enterprise, general fund, CWMP are about $13 million. It's going to double, more than double with the projects that have been proposed. So it could be like 25, 26 million by the time all of the obligations or the loans have been issued and we're paying them back.
But this doesn't, does that
Doesn't include that. No, this is only CWMP on this slide.
Right, but on this slide, this only actually is the loans taken out for up through fiscal year 2026.
That's correct. Yep.
So in the other data that I'll be looking at, that assumes that we continue to take loans out for the requirements for CWMP for 27, 28, 29, et cetera.
No,
no, I think it's the non-CWMP
non-CWMP.
related debt service.
So it's still, it's not going to match exactly CIP. It's because there's literally, I believe, $200 million worth of additional CIP. So there's like $170 million of additional loans that'll have to be taken out, for which we will have debt service in this time frame, right? That's not shown here.
It's not shown here, but you're really getting into weeds here, and
Yeah,
it's important, but you're getting down into the analytics of all of the debt service, and I don't know, I just know how far you want to go with that, but
I'm trying to keep it simple. The only point I'm actually trying to make is that I think the town council should understand is debt service is going to grow from about 3% of the operating plan to
the
about
operating budget.
8
budget.
to 9% of the operating budget, right?
yep. And there's also That's important, yes.
Okay,
Also, what's important is that there has been identified corresponding resource to offset that. So we're not redirecting funding that's currently going to operating budgets to pay for debt service. We have built in recurring funding sources to pay for all that debt service. So there's a match. There's a matching revenue to go along with the increase in debt service. Therefore, we're not reducing our budget flexibility at all by having to lock in more dollars to fixed loan payments based on current revenue streams. We have growing revenue streams that we're allocating to that debt service.
and those revenue streams are what?
Everything that you listed on I think it was on the previous slide, rooms taxes, meals taxes, short-term rentals, general fund property taxes.
Right, but they're insufficient after 2026.
Yes, they are. Yeah, we don't have enough to continue with the implementation of the CWMP.
Right.
But everything else is fine.
We can't fund all of the general fund either over the next 5 years. You'll
Yeah,
see
I think,
part 4 of the report, we show that we have the funding capacity to issue about $16 million in new loans to fund general fund projects. That's in
That's right.
addition to the CWMP projects.
okay, so well, I'll take a crack at recrafting this slide and run it by everybody. So
Yeah,
we get it
I
right.
think so, because it's getting very complicated and convoluted. Because if it's just CWMP, that's one thing, but you've got general fund and the others. So, if you could rethink all of the categories and simplify it,
Well, that's way too much. That's way too
yeah,
much.
I think it's,
mean-
I think we're,
Can't do that now.
I think we're gonna, this is more confusing. I think if you just have a statement that says it's going to be X% of fixed costs, and by 2030, it'll be 9%. That should be enough.
Yeah, it's actually 3% of total revenue going to 9%. It's not a percentage of fixed cost. It explodes fixed cost, right, Mark? Actually, debt service is its own line item.
Yeah, it's its own line item in the fixed
Well,
cost category.
Well, do we really want to insert this? I think it's more confusing
Well, I think we
than
need,
clarifying.
Yeah,
yeah,
the intent of this slide is that we want to begin a dialogue of the
Right.
effect of CWMP loan payments and the effect that will have. And I thought this slide laid it out. I mean, Hector asked some really good questions, and we've got some great dialogue. However, I still think the slide stands on its own.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, believe me, but
So, so I think we're not going to solve this now. Mark gave us a suggestion for looking at, Mark, where is this in the capital budget? Where
It's
that total,
Part 4, I think
It's
begins on
section
page
4.
25.
page 54?
Page 25 it begins on. It's part 4.
Okay,
Right.
okay, so why don't we just leave it that Neil and Jim and I will take a look at that and then reevaluate this slide and
Yeah.
we'll circulate a new slide. I think Lillian, we certainly don't want to confuse people, but we also don't want to sugarcoat what
No,
the
I
town
understand
council,
that.
what the town
But it's-
council has to decide.
Right.
and Hector, whatever we do, everything has to be able to tie into our approved CIP report.
Right,
We are not making up new numbers. These are all
Right.
things that we've reviewed and approved, and we're putting a story together.
right.
okay.
Neil-
So
Neil,
we
if
have some
you're
work to do.
Yep.
Let's move on to the next slide then.
Okay,
Okay.
So the next slides are all really right out of the advice.
Yeah.
So these are all bulletized as was recommended. So the first piece of advice is to update the CWMP plan, which Dan Santos agreed today. That's really coming up anyway. Starting now would be fine with them. And we make the same argument that we did in the document. So this is pretty much the same stuff. It's just bulletized.
So Director Santos has agreed with the content on this page?
Yeah, he did.
And
Did
if we go to the next page, which has the questions that we kind of posed, they had no problem with those questions either. So what's been learned? What are the implications, especially financially? And we did point out that the real issue that, we're most focused on is, how are we going to both control cost and find the money to do this? And they thought that these were very reasonable questions to pose that an update could help answer.
So if I can understand, the recommendation, update the adaptive CWMP plan now. The alternative is to wait, since the first CWMP plan, as shown on the prior slide, was approved in 2021. The update, were we to stay on a 5-year cycle, would be in fiscal 2026. And what we're recommending here, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so what we're saying is we want to move it ahead at least 1 year. Move ahead, do the update at least 1 year ahead of the cycle.
Now, what Dan stated today was that they've already started the process of doing the update, but it's going to take a year to complete it.
Okay,
So,
Yeah,
thank you. That's good.
okay,
So I think we're both on the same page there, Hector.
okay.
I think our focus, I've been through all the annual reports, and the problem that is they just don't really have a complete understand. They don't provide an understanding in the 275 pages of, well, what's this really going to cost? And then, of course, there is the issue that if we can find a way to start saving money, what are the alternatives? I think that's a reasonable thing for the update to helpfully address, because I'm sure when people see the increases in the new cost estimates, they're going to ask the same questions. So I think we came to kind of a similar conclusion, I felt.
Okay.
Okay. Then we have our second piece of advice, which is planned now for CIP in 2026 and beyond. The detailed trade-offs to consider and then decisions are required relative to the fiscal year 2026 through 2028 CIPs. Far outstrip the currently projected revenues to pay the debt service on all the new loans that are needed. And this is relative to CIP, not just CWMP. And as we've talked about, the riddle is really what's the mix that gets us more revenue from new taxes, one or more debt exclusions, lower investments that may or may not delay CWMP or school projects. And does there need to be diversion of funds between town services, CWMP, and schools? And obviously, determining the best mix is going to be require a lot of analysis and discussion and trade-offs. I think the point number 2 is if debt exclusions are going to be in the mix, as they have been for the last several years, and as was described and discussed at the town council meeting last October, a vote seems to be desirable in terms of having money ready for 2027 CWMP by having a vote in calendar 2025, according to Mark. So there's a lot of key questions that the town council should be trying to answer to figure out how many, what's been learned from the past ones. Since 4 out of 5 have not passed. Are the debt exclusions needed for CWMP, DPW, which as we saw earlier is way up, and the school, any one of them, all 3 of them, which would be problematic. how should they be communicated to the public? When should the vote actually be scheduled? And then start to think about Plan B. If these debt exclusions don't pass, what are the options that the town council ought to be thinking about?
Could I, from a presentation perspective, Neil, this is a lot to, I
Yeah.
don't know where my eye is supposed to go. So I would suggest, doing some kind of a swiping technique where you do one line, maybe one category, detailed trade-offs come out once, and then debt exclusion paragraph comes out once you're done going through the first one, or something like that, different, allow things to flow out as opposed to just all come out at the same page. I'm forgetting the term from our PowerPoint, what you do to make, every time you hit the return key, something, another swipe comes through.
Mark, from what you said, we have the power button, which allows us to go from slide to slide. So if I just break this into 2 slides, the top portion and then the top with the bottom, would that be make sense?
Yeah, this is a very busy slide. You may want to break it up into 2 slides.
Yeah, there's a lot of narrative here, Neil.
So
Okay.
Mark Milne, there's no control to, on the PowerPoint to do certain things.
Oh, you with transitions?
Yeah, the transition, thank
Yeah.
you, I've forgotten that word, right. So
Yep.
you want to transition, depending on what level of granularity, do you want to have detailed trade-offs, all those 3 main bullet points come out at once, or do you want to talk through every bullet point? Just to make it easier for the listener to absorb what it is that you're putting on the page.
Yeah,
Right.
if people don't have a problem, I'd like the idea of splitting it into 2 pages.
I agree with that.
There's less on each slide, and I'll just figure out a way to make sure they understand. We had 2 pages in the first one.
Yeah. And we might be able to, abbreviate some of the bullets, some of the words, and Neil, maybe I can work with you on that
Great.
to make this more, make it pithier. But
Yeah.
I like the way when you talked us through it, it made sense, but there are a lot of words here, so.
You've never known me to be short of words. So I can use the help. I appreciate it. Okay.
All right, so
We'll
this
work
will be,
on this too.
all right, so this will be slide 6 and slide 7 when we're done with that, okay?
So you're gonna split it into 2 slides, and you're gonna condense some of the narrative.
Yeah, I
Tighten.
think that,
Yeah,
Big
we'll
tight.
try.
because
We'll,
it's there's a lot there.
yeah. Okay,
The third piece of advice is we would suggest making a minor revision to the CIP process. As one has seen earlier, there can be an amazing amount of change by department and in total year to year. This year was, the average change by department was 46%, which is a lot more than 10-15% you might expect in terms of and hope for. To make them more consistent each year, we are advising adding an explanation of change table to each submission, which compares last year's submission to this year's submission and explains the changes, which may happen in the discussions between Mark and the departments, but we don't see. So we've proposed a 1-page analysis, which I don't include here. And I think this is really a decision that is pretty much up to Mark Milne, whether or not he wants to do this. And less words, even though some of these sentences are long.
Well, but really, they're just for you,
Yeah.
Neil. I mean, they're triggering your thoughts in the presentation, so you can make them short and use the compass, have all the other extra wordage in your notes, your speaker notes for reference, but.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I believe that the town council has our full written report, so they've seen this before. So if you just have header bullets, and then as Jim suggested, you can describe it verbally without it being in the text. If I understood what Jim said.
We do, yes. What I'm saying is I don't want our audience spending time reading what you've got on the page as opposed to
Exactly,
listening to what you're saying.
yeah.
Jim, could you take a crack at
But yes, of course,
tightening this for me?
I'll be happy to.
That'd be great.
Craig, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that last bullet, the proposed one-page analysis will help departments submit CIP requests that are more consistent year in year. There is no consistency year to year. As needs come up, as things happen to equipment or infrastructure, that is really what drives the CIP most of the time. And if something's funded, then it drops off, and unless there's a change, I just don't see how you can make a CIP request more consistent. But
I think I appreciate, and that's why I say the 10-15%. Do you think that a plus or minus 50% change is a normal thing for the town of Barnstable?
I would have to defer to Mark on that. Again, I think it just depends on what perhaps infrastructure fails, or what has to be done due to some regulatory change, or, I think each department tries to look out, 5 years as to what their needs are going to be and plan for that. But I don't think there's a way to say to make them consistent year to year. But, there is some value to trying to level it out, obviously, so that you're not getting the big ups and downs. But I just don't see how you can make it consistent. But just one man's opinion.
No, and I appreciate that because you've been through it here. In my experience in the past, by
In the corporate
yes,
arena.
in the corporate arena where you have the same issues, which is new things happen. Capital tends to be driven in a little bit different way. By having each of the departments reconcile to what and explain what they had last year and what has changed this year, we found we were able to dramatically improve, because people seem to, feel that one projection had nothing to do with the next. And when they start to have to say, we said this last year and we're saying that comes something completely different this year, at least in my experience, we found people were things got much more consistent, because people didn't want to explain that they changed their opinion unless there was something real.
Well, I think
Maybe it doesn't work here.
Well, picking up what Craig said, the different departments do and have CIP maintenance problems that occur that we had not anticipated. So then, it's not consistent.
Right.
So if a roof collapses, you've got to take care of it. So I think possibly the corporate model may not be totally in sync with public finance.
Oh, I'm sure it's not totally correct.
So maybe you could change that sentence a little bit.
so.
Well, I think this would be something that at the end of the day, I think it's really Mark Millen's decision. And with so many different past recommendations, not everyone gets accepted.
Right.
Yeah, if I could just comment to that, to Councilor Tamish's point, consistency in the capital program, you're not going to have it because a lot of things happen in the capital nature in our business in the world of capital. Number one, the things that affect the dollar amounts year over year are inflation. We've had record inflation for the past few years, which is impacting the capital program. The second thing is scope. Project scope changes from time to time on certain projects, and that's going to change the numbers from year to year. The third thing is timing. Well, we may have had several projects that were out in later years, but they got accelerated to earlier because grant opportunities came up, for example. Something along similar to that. And then you've got your cost estimates. Your cost estimates could be based on several things. They could be based on having no design currently for a project, a preliminary design on the project, or a and that's going to affect your cost estimates because you're refining the scope for that project and it's going to change the dollar amount. But I'm not sure what you mean by consistency. If you want the same dollar amounts submitted every single year for the capital project, that's not going to happen. There's too many moving parts.
Neil, I'd like to recommend that we remove that. It's just not worth the effort.
Remove.
Take out that proposed one page. And
Yeah, I agree.
We didn't talk about it in the report.
I think it should be
Pardon?
deleted.
It is part of the report.
Well,
Yeah.
no, not that assessment, not that wasn't. We had language discussing the CIP's consistency. We all agree, at least I know you and I did when we were there. But if we're stirring up this much discussion on a one-page analysis, it's really not.
I think there's another way to go, which for this slide, maybe I think Craig's comment really goes to the third bullet. And maybe we just make a more general statement that the capital planning through introducing explanation of change analysis, such as is shown in Appendix 3 of our report, may help the town plan its capital spending, plan better for capital spending without saying that this analysis is going to make it more consistent year to year, because I take Mark and Craig's points that there are a lot of vagaries to capital spending. But I also think that Neil's onto something where he says, and that explanation of change will force more discipline on the planners and on the people who are doing these are drawing up these plans every year. So I think maybe that's the phrase, force more discipline on the process.
Yeah, I just have a problem with the word consistent.
Yeah.
That's difficult word for me,
Yeah.
or to envision how that could be with the word consistent.
Yeah, but maybe we modify the third bullet and then Neil fool around with the wording in the second bullet with the word consistent and really focus on planning, something like that. Neil, I think you and Jim and I could probably talk about this slide, and I'd like to hang on to the idea of the explanation of change proposal.
Yeah.
And again, Mark, it's going to be up to Mark whether it wants to institute that. But
Hector, we just went through that. Neil asked Mark's opinion. Mark didn't support it, and I'm recommending we remove it because it's going to be up to Mark's team to do that. And I didn't hear a round of support. And why don't we just try to do better on that second sentence, that second paragraph, maybe? But I don't see. I don't feel any support for it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If we're now at a point where we have feedback that this is not going to fly, why waste time at the meeting on it?
Why have it a distraction during your presentation?
So the concept is to drop this third piece of CFAC advice from the pitch, from the presentation.
Yes, it's been moved and seconded to delete that third bullet.
Oh, the third bullet. I'm talking about the slide as a whole.
No.
The slide.
Oh, no. Yeah.
No.
Okay. I understand.
So what was your motion then, Jim?
To remove
it was
the
just a
third
third bullet.
sentence on slide number. I don't have the slide numbers, but
slide 7.
So this particular slide that we're looking at.
Correct.
Yeah, just drop
Delete
that
it.
third bullet.
Yeah, I got it. There was a third bullet. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then we need to,
One-page analysis.
are we in agreement? Do we need to take a formal vote on it?
No, I don't think so. I think,
Okay, so
I think we can drop it.
so we're
Well-
gonna drop that third bullet.
We're going to drop the third bullet and we're going to replace the word consistent in the second bullet to something different.
Something.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, make a more
Okay.
general statement. Okay.
All right, moving on then.
And what we've, as our fourth piece of advice, we're suggesting and considering a policy to lower capital repair costs. Each year, there are many requests for capital to repair buildings and roads that outstrip what the town manager feels the town can fund. The result is the maintenance gets deferred, which is kind of commonplace. When this happens year after year, the assets continue to deteriorate. A policy that might help reduce this would be to have a policy as to when not to acquire new capital assets, when to divest assets, and when to see if we can move assets to other organizations who would then be responsible for maintaining the asset without town resources.
The town council just established a committee to deal with this.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the way I read it at first too, but I don't think that's actually what they're thinking, that what their motivation is. Is it?
No, I think they're
No.
actually looking at the capital assets. They're not looking so much to the repair of those assets. Because the town owns a lot of property and capital assets. And so that committee, the way I understood it, is they're going to look at it and determine what to keep and what to divest.
I think you're right, Lillian. I see that as it, and I think this is a little bit different because this is looking at the maintenance of the assets that we
Yeah,
have.
this is
And
two
it's a
different.
little bit of focus, different focus.
This is actually two issues. One is repair and the other is assets.
Yeah, and this is driven by the repair, and frankly, I would think maybe the way they could work is that town council subcommittee might want to just embed this within what they're going to do as another criteria for thinking about the assets to be acquired or divested. I mean, it's a significant amount of capital, not percentage wise, but in terms of dollars.
and there is history behind this section here. When we went through the CIP discussion with staff, and there was discussion amongst the staff themselves whether or not certain assets should be retained or should they consider divesting themselves of it. And that's what the genesis of this discussion
Right.
topic was. We picked up on it and thought, well, if they're talking about it, then maybe we should be thinking about that as well and offering that as some additional advice or guidance. That's all. That's the history behind this capital needs.
I think the idea is very good. I wonder if you could tighten up the text a little bit because it's a really full slide.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay,
Neil, are you on board with that? Trying
Yeah.
to,
Yeah, you're good at tightening. Do you want to take a
Okay.
crack at it first?
sure.
Thanks.
okay.
And that's the content. The last slide is
The summary of,
a placeholder.
Another
Yeah.
great slide. Another great slide.
this is a wonderful slide. I'm wondering
Neil,
whether,
This
I'm
would
wondering
be,
whether,
Neil, this would be awesome with a transition. Would be incredible.
It's
So
it's really just a reminder. What did we talk about for the last 10 minutes?
I'm wondering whether this particular slide should precede the explanations of each of those.
You may want
Just
to make
as-
this your very first slide, Neil.
Yeah, make this the slide. These are the questions and answers. So you start with one, and so the town council then sees all four, and then you go on to one, and then 2, 3, and 4. And
And
so
then,
they could follow it logically.
yeah, I think that's right. And then I would have this slide, Neil, when we're done speaking, have this slide pop up again. So it
Yeah.
bookends both
Yeah.
ends of the discussion. But we would change the header. We would leave questions or comments for this slide at the end of the presentation, but have, call it summary of CFAX recommendations or something like that, and have that start off the presentation.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
Are you okay with that, Mark? Keep adding slides here. We've
Well,
added 2 slides so far.
but that's okay. We
Right.
don't need to spend a ton of time on each one. It's just it helps guide the discussion.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just so well trained on cutting things down and tightening.
Yeah.
I didn't
Well,
want to add extra slides.
So let's add the new slide at the beginning, and then Neil, you, Jim, and I will work on all of them as we
Good.
discuss. Yeah.
Now, I want to ask for some guidance here, because we have in public meeting approved our CIP report. If we wanted to work, if Neil, Hector, and I wanted to work on this on a Zoom call, can we do that without having to do a public meeting?
I think it is a public meeting.
You are officially established as a subcommittee.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think that.
It just makes it really hard. It really, I
does.
mean, okay.
Actually, to that point, since it sounds like do need to have a public meeting, an agenda and all, may I take the group's time just to find a date when Hector, Jim, and I could do that, and so we can get it to Mark sooner than later?
If I'm just making editorial changes, can I do that? And submit?
And then,
I don't think we want another public meeting. We've had enough.
You can email Neil your suggested edits, but just
Okay.
don't going back and forth, basically having a conversation.
Okay.
But yeah, if you just make it one email with suggested edits, that's fine.
yeah.
Okay.
I think that's all it is. We're tweaking what we've already agreed on. It's not making any new policy.
Well, you're not changing the intent of your.
Well, that's right. I
No.
mean, this
Your
is an
report.
approved. It's an
Right.
approved document.
Actually, to that end, Mark could give us guidance on this. If, for instance, Jim sent his editorial changes to Hector, who then did his editorial changes and tightening, who then sent it to me, would that be within the rules?
It questionable, because it's now the three of you are involved in an email chain. You could be accused of having a conversation of the subcommittee. It's just best to avoid doing that kind of stuff
Okay.
outside of a public format. This is the problem with 3-person subcommittees. Two makes a quorum. And this was something that the town council recently wrestled with when they were creating the 5 subcommittees or ad hoc committees that they did at their last meeting. They made them a minimum of 5 people, so that 2 people could have a conversation without creating a quorum. So if you want to have an exchange amongst all 3 members somehow, we should probably do a public meeting.
Or as an alternative to disband the subcommittee, and that way 3 is not a quorum?
Well, I think we have our marching orders. We'll just, I'll just make edits and send them to you, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Okay. We'll figure it out.
We'll figure
We
it out.
will.
If
we
we
will.
need one, we'll ask.
Or you just give Neil the editorial authority to finalize it based on the comments tonight.
Okay. Well, thank you, Neil.
Thank you for everybody helping.
Great job, Neil.
Yeah. Neil will be presenting this at the town council meeting on the 4th. And so we look forward to that. So anybody who would like to, any member of the CFAC who'd like to attend the town council meeting is welcome, you know.
And what date will that be again, please?
It would be Thursday, April 4th.
It's a week from this coming Thursday.
Right. We don't know when that time will come because, you know, public comment takes a bit of a time during the beginning of the meeting.
And just so I'm clear, Mark, your presentation starts off with 17 slides and then you turn it over to the CIP subcommittee.
To Lillian.
Yes, I think what we're gonna, I've incorporated slides with my presentation slides. I'll do the introduction. I'll turn it over to Lillian, who's gonna make a few comments. And then she'll turn it over to Neil, who will review these slides.
Okay, but you have 17 slides, which you're gonna go through before the CIP discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions about the mechanics and timing of all this? Okay. Well, we'll move on then to the operating budget development. Chuck?
Righty. Let me look at my notes here. So for the people not on the operating budget subcommittee, and I think we should increase our membership by 1, Lillian, so that we can have 2 people who can talk and not have to have a public meeting. We have allocated report sections among Chris, Jackie, Lillian, and me. So we now know who owns what as we get the process started. Neil was kind enough to send me a editable version of the CIP report. So, you know, subject to how we go and how the committee feels, I think our intention is to reflect the layout and the formatting of the CIP report so that it looks consistent and it looks like it came from 2 subcommittees that are part of the same overall committee. But there may be some things from last year's report that we think still fit that weren't in the CIP report. So I just prefer to say spiritually, we're going to do the best job we can to reflect the format and layout of the CIP report, and we'll just see how it goes. But thank you to Neil for sharing that so that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Mark was kind enough to send me the numbers that are available so far for general fund revenues and school operating budget. And I gather the municipal operating budget, the additional funding requests, and the enterprise fund pro formas are still in the works. And so we'll get those when they're ready. One of the things that I did want to talk to the whole group about is in the past, I think we have elected to interview and meet with some of the departments, and it hasn't been the same ones every year, but there have been some commonalities to most of these efforts. So I'm wondering if we have if people want to offer opinions about which departments it would be particularly helpful to meet with, you know, within the construct of getting this done by the critical delivery dates. I'm going to stop. That was a question.
I
Well,
think
I
one of the obvious ones would be school department. Their operating budget is significant.
And I think DPW.
Okay, I think Chris has Chris, am I wrong? that
Yeah,
these-
those are the two obvious ones. I mean, DPW would be helpful, schools. We can certainly get the new police chief in, I guess, too. Just depends. I think all of those would be helpful.
All right, so schools and DPW, definitely, police, maybe. All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chuck. Those are your big three.
Okay.
So a majority of the funding goes. Fourth, large category are the fixed costs. And I've already provided you a projection as to what those look like. So if you have questions behind the fixed costs, I'll be happy to provide you any detail you want on those.
Okay.
Thank you, yeah. So
And-
do we want to begin scheduling schools, DPW, and police?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure who you're asking, Lillian, but to me, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, the school just released their operating, I mean, they started their discussions, right? So,
Right,
They've had a few public hearings already. Their last public hearing was last Wednesday night. The school committee is expected to adopt their proposed budget on April 3rd at that school committee meeting. That adopted budget will then get sent to the town manager, and he'll include their proposed or adopted budget in his budget proposal that goes before the town council. So that may be the first department you may want to try to get in, since they're well ahead of everybody else. They're almost completed with their budget adoption. You have 2 meetings scheduled in April. It looks like April 8th and April 22nd.
the 8th, I guess, would be too soon for us to have the schools.
I don't think so. It all depends on the superintendent's availability
Uh-huh,
that date, because she's been presenting this budget for several weeks now to the school committee and at public hearings. So she's probably prepared. It's just a matter of whether she's available that evening.
can we try to get her for the 8th?
I will reach out to her tomorrow.
Thank you, yeah. And then how about DPW for the 22nd?
Okay. I'll check with Director Santos and
Okay.
his team.
Yeah. And Chris, did you want the police?
If we can fit them in, I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
Well, we might,
What date is this report due?
That was one question, Marcus. I'm hoping you can walk us backwards on.
it's May something,
May 13th.
May 13th, okay.
So you may want to have, similar to what the CIP subcommittee did, if you're going to have a CI or an operating budget subcommittee, you may want to think about having more frequent meetings.
Yes,
And fit all of this in. You have a few departments that you want to talk to, and then you have report development discussions that will take place. So you may need more than just between, and then you only have 3 meetings.
Yep.
So should we try to have a special meeting in between the 8th and the 22nd? Is that something you want to do?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And would you like me to send out something to the subcommittee meeting? The challenge is Jackie isn't here.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because she's doing the schools.
Right, and she's handling the school, so why don't I send something out to the subcommittee members with some possible dates, and hopefully we can land on a couple, so we will have them on the calendar.
Yeah,
Okay, I will do that.
okay. So we have a lot of the basic information that Mark has already provided to us. Enterprise funds are coming in shortly.
Yes, and I will send what I have for the general fund and schools, just so we all have the same documents.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'll do
If
that.
I
after
might,
the-
if I might volunteer, one of the things on the CIP subcommittee that we found really useful is, since we had the data ahead of time, we were able to send a short list of, what are the biggest questions we had that could help fill in, things we didn't understand from the numbers or wanted to get deeper into. And everyone who came with answers right up front, and they made it much more efficient for us, at least. I don't know if you want to think about that.
Okay, that's a good suggestion.
It is.
Actually, DPW came back twice, and each time answered the questions. It was really helpful.
Yeah, they addressed the questions.
Yeah.
Which was, yeah, really saved a lot of time, and it was focus. Okay.
Right.
Anything else, Chuck?
I'm looking at my notes. The only other question I had, Mark already answered, I think, and that is, are subcommittee meetings considered public meetings that have to be announced? And I heard the answer is yes. So
It is, yes.
we will make sure we stay within the bounds of, advanced disclosure and all that stuff.
Okay. Well, thank you. So you will be sending and to find out when we can have a subcommittee meeting.
Correct. I will send you the documents that I have, so we all have the same basic information. And I will send out some dates. Mark, what's the advance notice on these meetings?
It's 48 hours, 48 hours.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yep.
That's cool. Then we're good.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have to have an agenda.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
I will
Chuck.
do that. Yep.
Okay, I noticed that we have a couple of town councilors here, and so I'm going to call and see if Paul Neary or Chris Clark or Gordon Starr has any, if any of you have any comments, we will welcome you to our committee, and you can tell us what you thought about our conversation today.
Thank you, Lillian. I'm always impressed with you. It's a lot of parts to this that you've got to kind of dig through. I read the CFAC report this year, and it certainly was eye-opening. Primarily due to the tremendous increase in costs on this CWMP as it's rolled out. We were our original plan was to revisit this every 5 years, and it's great that we're doing that. But now I'm almost wondering whether we should shorten that window a little bit to try to, figure out how are we going to generate revenue to pay for this, as well as that's just a piece of the budget. School department is a big one this year, and obviously the DPW with the implementation of this the sewering of the town. So it really was eye-opening. We talk about different things we can do at the council level, whether it be road repairs or public and private roads, those type of things. And when you look at the big budget and just this piece of it adding $13 million annually to pay just the debt, it's going to be, the next few years will be very, very, very interesting to see how they roll out. I'm happy that we've got Mark on board with this, so the pressure will be mounting.
We all are.
Yeah.
All of us are, yes.
Yeah, but we are always thrilled at any ideas, anything that this committee can come up with. A lot of times we kind of get mired in the weeds, and it's great to have some people on the outside kind of looking at what's going on. And either way, we'll slog our way through it. But I remember when we were talking about the strategic vision of the town, and one of the lines is to aggressively pursue new tax dollars. And there was some conversation about it. It certainly needs to be aggressive at this point to get funds, find funds to support the town. And the hardest thing would be reaching out to the residents and having to start talking about cutting. The town has always asked to provide more and more services, right? And it's a wonderful town that we're in, and we've been very fortunate to provide all of these services to the residents. But it'll be a big number over the next few years. It really will be a big number. So, but again, thanks for all you do. And
It's a big.
I've seen these reports before.
It's a big challenge for the council.
Oh yeah.
But know that we're here to help. Call us.
And how many? Is there any openings on CFAC right now?
We have one.
One. Okay.
We have one. So if you know anybody who is eager to help with the budget, we would welcome them.
Fantastic.
Chris Clark, do you have any comments?
Thank you very much. I am on the appointments committee, so I invite any suggestions for people who might be interested in applying to be on the CFAC. And we very much know how valuable your service is. We recently appointed Tom Keene to your committee, so hopefully you'll see his participation and evaluation in your deliberations soon. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I wholeheartedly embrace the work that you do as volunteers. And if you have suggestions for someone to be on your committee to fully appoint the members on your committee, please send them our way. Thank you.
Thank you. Gordon?
Hello there. I also want to thank everybody. I read the report. It's like Paul said, it's eye-opening. We sort of knew it was coming. We didn't know it was going to come as a tidal wave. And maybe this committee could help us. Somehow we have to decide on our strategy for an override, a debt exclusion. It's going to have to happen. And we're going to have to sell it somehow. So maybe some of us could get together and form another committee. I don't know. Somehow we need a plan moving forward. And I think I agree with Mr. Neary that we need to move up originally the CWMP was created with a Water Resources Advisory Committee. And I think we need a committee of townspeople to look at the CWMP as it starts to fold forward. I don't, hearing that Mr. Santos is doing it in-house, I'm not sure that's the way it's supposed to be. I think we should have some outside voices looking at alternatives as we go forward. So that's my thought. I think we should have a committee looking at CWMP. So I guess those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you. Craig?
Well, I just wanted to echo a little bit of what Gordon said. I think it's going to be extremely important, and we certainly would look for the support of the CFAC going forward on override or debt exclusion. I really don't see any way around it for the future. It's going to happen, and one of the slides mentioned Plan B, and I think we'll be looking for you to help with a Plan B if necessary. Also, there's just so much work that needs to be done. The CWMP is really the 800-pound gorilla in the room, I think. But thank you for the work that you've done and have been doing.
Well, we're all in this one together.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Lillian?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to make sure that when you make your presentation, please deliver to not only the council, but I'm aware that the citizens are always listening, or some citizens are listening, that this is a mandated directive from the state that we take care of our nitrogen loading problem. So preface any of your um, explanations about the expenses that this is, we are mandated to do this CWMP. I think that would be helpful to make sure that the residents know that this is not a frivolous undertaking, but that there is a legal binding directive for us to do so. Thank you.
Good point. Does anybody else have any comments?
Lillian, I just, you might want to just express this. I don't want to take, it's just overstep my bounds, but the whole notion of we operate as directed, correct, from town council. So the idea of us on our own coming up with ideas, just it's not the way our charter is written. So if you would like us to work on specific topics, then that should come from you to Lillian, to Mark, and then we would work accordingly. So, no.
Yeah, that is a wonderful point that you make, Jim, because I had a conversation with another counselor of a few days ago, and they did not realize that we have constraints on what our responsibilities are. So CFAC technically analyzes the CIP and the operating budget and provides long-range financial planning at the request of town council or the town manager. So we do not initiate. So if you have anything that you'd like us to research, we would need to get a request from you. But that's an important point because I think many people think that we can initiate anything, but we cannot.
Point taken.
Thank you. Is there any correspondence from committee members? Our new member was sworn in today, Tom Keene, and Mark has sent him all of the up-to-date documentation, so he will be busily reading them until our next meeting.
You think he's still gonna come?
Good luck.
Well, if he's still alive by the next meeting, I guess he'll be here. Mark, do you have anything that you would like to communicate to us?
Thank you, Lillian. Yes, I did send out a press release today from the Cape Cod
Good.
Commission that talked about
That was
a
awesome.
change that the governing board made to providing subsidies through the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. Previously to the vote that they took last week, the governing board, that is, a subsidy was provided, a 25% subsidy was provided on projects that were listed on the Department of Environmental Protection's intended use plan. And that was delivered to the Mass Clean Water Trust, and the trust would apply that 25% subsidy against the loans that the community would take out through the trust. And it was divided over a 4-year period. So they would rewrite the loan. They take the 25% subsidy, apply 1/4 of it to year 1, rewrite the loan in year 2, again in year 3, and again in year 4. So that the subsidy would happen over a 4-year time frame, because the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund needed to collect the money to provide that 25% subsidy, and it takes a few years to do so. With the increase in project costs that are actually being submitted to DEP and getting listed on the intended use plans, they were no longer able to provide a 25% subsidy. And so what they decided to do is to, instead of giving that money to the trust to apply against the loans that we take out through the trust, they're going to give them over a 4-year period. They're going to apply it over the length of the loan now. So we're going to get a 25% subsidy still, but it's going to be provided to us over a 20 to 30-year period instead. So in essence, what they did is they stretched out the amortization of the subsidy from 4 years to 20 to 30 years. And their updated projected revenue sources should allow them to provide subsidies at that level. The downside to that strategy is that we have to borrow more money through the trust, incurring more interest cost. The upside is that we get that 25% subsidy. And we've done some analysis on project costs, and essentially it turns out it results in a positive financial gain for the town, this new
Wow.
strategy. The additional borrowing cost we incur is less than the subsidy we would have lost. They were talking about dropping our subsidies from 25% to 12%. Maintaining the 25% subsidy, but stretching it out over 20 to 30 years. It results in a positive financial gain for us. So that's what's going to happen going forward. We'll have to rerun our models for funding the CWMP with this brand new information. We're getting new information all the time, whether it's regulatory information, technical information, financial information. As we've all been discussing for a number of years now, this is an adaptive plan, and we will adapt.
How much do we think that we will fund CWMP through this protection fund?
We're trying to do as much as we possibly can. Every project that we bring forward, we are going to submit it to the state's revolving loan fund.
Sure.
But however, they have limitations. They can only fund so many loans a year.
Right.
I think they have north of $3 billion in funding requests last year. About $1 billion was actually listed and approved. Our projects that you see coming forward in the FY25 CIP, both were listed. I think they were number 1 and number 3 on their list.
Wow.
So they ranked very high. And then on top of the funding limitation, we're capped at borrowing $50 million a year through the trust. And so, for example, the large project that is in the 25 CIP, I think for $169 million, we're going to take that out in the form of 4 loans over the next 4 years through the trust. We can't do it all in 1 year. It has to be spread out over 4 years because we're capped at $50 million a year. But that's likely how the cash flow is going to work anyways. We're not going to spend $170 million in 1 year. That's a massive project that's going to take years to construct. And so we'll finance it piecemeal over multiple years. But I'm sure there'll be some projects that down the road, which they may not have enough funding to provide us a loan to the trust, and we'll have to issue a general obligation bond.
So Mark, the constraint on the town of Barnstable is we can borrow no more than $50 million from the
A year.
Water Protection Fund each fiscal year.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
for clean water projects, and it's $15 million for drinking water projects.
So 65 altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the 50 million constraint applies directly to CWMP projects.
Clean water, yeah, sewer projects. We also have, other sewer projects that aren't part of the comprehensive wastewater management plan, like the pump station we're doing down at 720
Right.
Main Street. That's part of our existing sewer infrastructure. It's not a CWMP project. That project's being funded through sewer rates, financed through the Clean Water Trust.
Mark,
So do we have a stream then of $65 million a year?
We could. It's not guaranteed. We could.
Yeah.
Again, all project submissions from every
Right.
entity go up to DEP. They have a scoring process that ranks them, and then they have funding limitations. So we have
Mark,
to.
is there kind of a rule of thumb or a measure of how many basis points do we save by being able to tap into the new Water Protection Fund formula, which amortizes over 20 or 30 years? versus going to the general obligation market? Is that like 20 basis points or 200 basis points?
It's probably 250 to 270 basis points. Because we
Hmm.
could borrow through the trust at 1.5%. General obligation bonds are running about 4%.
Okay. And so the 1.5% is kind of the net interest after the refund, so to speak?
You mean a subsidy?
Yes. Or is
No.
that,
so- Yeah,
that's the straight
again,
rate?
the subsidy is going to be applied to our loan payment, so it's after the borrowing costs.
Ah, okay.
Oh, so it's not to the,
That's what I was talking about when it's going to cost us more to borrow, but keeping a 25% subsidy versus a 12% subsidy is a net gain for us.
yeah, I understand that. I was just trying to understand how big a deal it is to have the water protection fund money.
Yeah, it's 250 or more basis points.
That's a very big deal. Anybody else have any questions of Mark on this? Yeah, I had heard, I guess they've been discussing going from 25% to 12% for a while.
Mark, maybe in a future CFAC meeting, you can show us, a synopsis of your updated model that includes the new trust formula for the subsidies.
Sure.
So we get to see how it's changed. Get an explanation of change, which is what Neil is pushing for.
Yeah.
But no, but
Oh,
seriously,
sure,
that would
blame
be
it on
helpful.
me.
But that would be helpful because I frankly don't know. I haven't seen your model, so I'm having a hard time understanding how the cash flows. So maybe you could spend 20 minutes during a future CFAC meeting running all that by
Yeah,
us.
it's been a while since we've taken a look at the model. We have gone over it a few times in the past as I've presented it to the town council. I've presented those presentations to this group as well, but it's been a while, so we'll do an update for you.
Okay, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other comments from the members? Is there any new business to come before the committee? Not hearing any, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Chuck?
Chuck, you're
You're
muted.
Sorry, Lillian,
Here, yes.
Hector,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Neil,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and Chuck is yes, so we are good.